Hey guys, tonight we're going to embark on a rather slow-paced journey, tracing the faint, dusty footsteps of history's first mail carriers. Imagine, if you will, the scorching sands of ancient Egypt, the sun beating down mercilessly on your bare head. You're not just strolling, you're perhaps a royal messenger, carrying a papyrus scroll that could determine the fate of a harvest, or maybe even a kingdom. Your only companions are the endless dunes, the distant glint of the Nile, and the persistent buzz of ancient insects. You're parched, your sandals are already worn, and you know that if you fail, if the message doesn't reach its destination, well, you probably won't survive this particular career path. Delivering mail back then wasn't quite like popping a letter in a bright red mailbox. It was a grueling, often dangerous undertaking. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story, or at least the very earliest whispers of it, begins in the land of pyramids and pharaohs, ancient Egypt. Picture yourself in the bustling marketplace of Memphis, the air thick with the scent of spices, dust, and something vaguely resembling stale bread. You see scribes meticulously unrolling papyrus, preparing messages for the pharaoh. But how did these vital messages, often concerning tax collection, military movements, or decrees from the divine ruler, actually travel across a kingdom as vast as ancient Egypt? Well, it wasn't exactly express delivery by drone, was it? For truly urgent matters, the pharaohs relied on a network of dedicated runners, men who were as fit as modern-day marathoners, perhaps even fitter considering their lack of energy gels or fancy trainers. These individuals, often members of the royal court or specially trained servants, would literally run the messages from one administrative center to another. Imagine the stamina required, often traversing hundreds of miles under the relentless Egyptian sun. This wasn't a leisurely jog. It was a high-stakes sprint for the very survival of the state. One mainstream historical fact we know is that these Egyptian message runners were indeed mentioned in ancient texts and depicted in tomb paintings, showing their importance in the administration of the Old Kingdom. They were essentially the original runners in the sense of a professional delivery service, long before the word post even existed. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some scholars suggest that these runners might have chewed on specific herbs or roots to boost their endurance and suppress hunger during their arduous journeys. We don't have definitive proof of this ancient energy drink, but it's a fun thought, isn't it? Perhaps they had their own version of a protein bar, though I doubt it tasted like chocolate. Historians still argue whether these early Egyptian systems constituted a true postal service in the modern sense, or if they were more akin to ad hoc courier networks for the elite. The distinction lies in whether the service was available to the general public or exclusively for state business. For the most part, it seems messages in ancient Egypt were a privilege of power, not a public utility. You certainly couldn't send a postcard to your cousin in Thebes just because you missed them. The concept of personal correspondence, let alone public mail, was still millennia away. So, as you drift off, imagine those silent, determined figures pounding the sands of ancient Egypt, carrying the whispers of power across a silent, vast land. Their dedication, often unseen, laid the very first, tentative groundwork for the interconnected world we inhabit today. From the sun-baked sands of Egypt, our sleepy journey now takes us eastward to an empire that truly understood scale, the vast dominion of Persia under the mighty Achaemenids. Close your eyes and imagine the dusty, well-trodden path stretching before you, not just for miles, but for thousands of miles. This isn't just a track in the sand. It's the Royal Road, a marvel of ancient infrastructure meticulously planned and maintained. You're not just a lone runner anymore. You're part of a highly organized, almost clockwork-like system designed to move information at an astonishing pace for the 5th century BCE. The Persians, particularly under rulers like Darius the Great, were masters of administration, and they understood that a vast empire needed vast, efficient communication. Their solution was the Angarian, their state-sponsored courier system. This wasn't merely about having fast runners. It was about strategically placed post houses or way stations, roughly a day's ride apart. Think of them as ancient rest stops, but instead of greasy burgers and lukewarm coffee, you'd find fresh horses, provisions, and perhaps even a new, rested rider waiting. Imagine, if you will, galloping at full tilt, the wind in your hair, and as your horse begins to tire, you see a small outpost on the horizon. No need to dismount. No time to waste. A fresh horse is ready, and perhaps another rider is already swinging into the saddle, eager to take the message on the next leg. This was the epitome of efficiency for its time. A mainstream historical fact about the Persian royal road is that Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian, famously praised its speed, noting that neither snow nor rain, nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. Sound familiar? It's the unofficial motto of the U.S. Postal Service, borrowed from a tribute to these ancient Persian messengers. It perfectly captures their dedication. Now for a quirky tidbit. It's said that these Persian couriers, known as pyrodatsis, were incredibly tough. They were rumored to carry a specific type of dried meat or cheese in their pouches for sustenance, allowing them to remain on horseback for extended periods with minimal stops. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? No energy drinks, just a bit of jerky and sheer willpower to keep them going. You certainly wouldn't find them pulling over for a quick nap by the side of the road, tempting though it might have been. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of the Royal Road and the Angarian was purely military and administrative, or if there was a limited capacity for private messages, perhaps for merchants or high-ranking citizens. Most evidence points to it being largely a state-controlled asset, ensuring the emperor's decrees reached every corner of his vast domain and intelligence flowed back to the capital. The sheer scale was breathtaking, stretching over 1,600 miles from Susa to Sardis. It could take a message a mere 7 days to travel a distance that would normally take 3 months. So, as you begin to feel your eyelids grow heavy, picture those swift Persian riders, a blur on the horizon, embodying the first true long-distance communication network, galloping towards a peaceful slumber. Having galloped across the Persian plains, our slow-paced historical journey now drifts westward, settling gently upon the grand stage of the Roman Empire. Close your eyes and imagine yourself not on horseback, but perhaps jostling along in a cart on a remarkably well-built, paved road, the sounds of distant legionary marching or the gentle murmur of a nearby stream accompanying your slumber. You're now witnessing the cursus publicus, the public course, Rome's highly sophisticated and incredibly efficient imperial postal system. Unlike the more ad hoc Egyptian runners, or even the relay riders of Persia, the Romans built an infrastructure designed to last, one that, in some places, still forms the basis of modern European roads. This wasn't just about speed, it was about control and communication across an empire that stretched from Britannia to Mesopotamia. The Cursus Publicus maintained a network of relay stations, mutations, where fresh horses and wagons could be obtained, and inns, mansions for overnight stays and more substantial rest for the couriers. Imagine pulling into a mancio after a long day on the road, tired but knowing that your message, a vital dispatch from the emperor in Rome to a distant governor, would continue its journey without significant delay. This system allowed government messages, officials, and even goods to travel at speeds that were unparalleled for nearly a millennium after Rome's fall. A testament to Roman organizational genius, truly. A mainstream historical fact is that the Cursus Publicus was so effective that it could allow a message to travel around 50 miles per day, sometimes more for urgent dispatches. This was significantly faster than typical travel for ordinary citizens. However, using this system wasn't open to just anyone. You needed a special warrant, known as a diploma or a vectio, issued by the emperor himself or a high-ranking official. Without it, you were out of luck. Your personal letter to Aunt Martha would have to find a less efficient slower way to travel, likely by word of mouth or a passing merchant. Now, for a quirky tidbit about the cursus publicus, because the system was so efficient and provided free travel and lodging, it was, predictably, prone to abuse. Officials would often issue these diplomas to friends or family members, essentially giving them a free pass to travel the empire at the state's expense. Emperors constantly issued edicts trying to curb this widespread freeloading. Imagine trying to explain to the local postmaster that your Roman holiday to Pompeii was definitely official state business. You might try, but I doubt it would work. Historians still argue whether the cursus publicus primarily served military ends, swiftly moving troops and intelligence, or if its main function was administrative, ensuring the smooth collection of taxes and implementation of laws across the vast Roman provinces. It was likely a blend of both, adapting to the empire's needs. So, as you slowly drift into slumber, picture those sturdy Roman roads, the rhythmic clopping of hooves, and the silent, efficient transfer of power and information, all carried by Rome's enduring postal service. Leaving the grandeur of Rome behind, our gently meandering historical tour now whisks us further east to a civilization equally vast and arguably even more ancient in its postal ambitions, Imperial China. Close your eyes and imagine the intricate network of canals, the towering pagoda roofs, and the distant, rhythmic clang of a blacksmith at work. You're now encountering a system of communication that was, in many ways, even more extensive and long-lasting than anything seen in the West. We're talking about the Imperial Post Road System, a colossal undertaking that spanned thousands of miles and endured for nearly 2 millennia. The Chinese imperial postal system wasn't just a simple collection of runners. It was an incredibly sophisticated and meticulously organized enterprise, evolving over successive dynasties. From the Qin and Han dynasties through the Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing, the fundamental principles remained. A network of post houses, Yizhan, spaced at regular intervals, providing fresh horses, accommodation, and often fresh couriers. Think of it as the ultimate ancient delivery service, running non-stop, rain or shine, for emperors whose decrees needed to reach the most distant provinces. A mainstream historical fact is that during the Yuan dynasty, under Mongol rule, the postal system, known as the Yam, reached its zenith. Marco Polo, the famous Venetian traveler, marveled at its efficiency, reporting that there were over 10,000 post houses in China at the time, connecting the vast empire. Imagine the logistics. It was like a perfectly choreographed ballet of horses and riders, ensuring that messages from the Great Khan could reach his furthest commanders with astonishing speed. Some messages could travel over 200 miles in a single day, a truly remarkable feat for the time. Now for a quirky tidbit. To ensure the imperial messages couldn't be tampered with or read by unauthorized eyes, many couriers carried official seals or tallies that had to match those at the receiving end. If the tallies didn't align, or if there was any sign of tampering, the message was considered compromised. It's a bit like a medieval blockchain, ensuring integrity, but with slightly less computing power involved. Imagine the pressure on those couriers to keep their little wooden tallies safe. Losing one probably meant losing your head, or at least your job. Historians still argue whether the Chinese imperial postal system, despite its scale, was solely for government use, or if it had any informal capacity for private citizens to send messages. While the official stance was state-only, it's plausible that some lower-ranking officials or merchants with connections might have occasionally piggybacked on the system, sending a personal message or two alongside official dispatches, especially in more remote areas. However, for the average citizen, sending a letter across China was still a distant dream. So, as you let the gentle hum of the fan lull you to sleep, picture the endless procession of imperial couriers on China's ancient roads, a silent testament to the enduring power of communication in the rise and fall of empires. Drifting away from the grand empires of the old world, our gentle historical exploration now guides us across vast oceans and towering mountains to a civilization with a truly unique approach to communication. The Inca Empire in ancient Peru. Close your eyes and imagine the crisp, thin air of the Andes, the majestic peaks shrouded in mist, and the distant, haunting cry of a condor. Here, in a land without writing as we know it, the concept of a postal service takes on an entirely different, fascinating form. The Inca, masters of organization and engineering, governed an empire that stretched over 2,500 miles along the spine of the Andes. They didn't have paper, ink, or a phonetic alphabet. So how did decrees from the Sapa Inca, or reports from distant provinces, travel across such challenging terrain? They used a system that was both brilliantly simple and incredibly effective: the chasquis and the quipu. The chasquis were the agile, highly trained relay runners of the Inca Empire. Imagine these individuals, often very young and incredibly fit, running along the famous Inca road network, which rivaled Roman roads in its scope and engineering. These roads traversed dizzying mountain passes, crossed vast deserts, and plunged into deep valleys. The chasquis would run from one tambo, relay station or way station, to the next, often just a few miles apart, where a fresh chasca would be waiting. The outgoing runner would transfer the message, not spoken words usually, but rather encoded information on a quipu. A mainstream historical fact about the chasquis is their astonishing speed. Messages could travel up to 150 miles in a single day. This meant that fresh fish from the Pacific coast could reach the Sapa Incas table high in the mountains of Cusco within 48 hours. Imagine that level of fresh delivery without refrigeration or modern transport. It's mind-boggling when you consider the mountainous terrain. Now for a quirky tidbit about the quipu. These were complex recording devices made of knotted strings, typically wool or cotton, that recorded numerical and sometimes non-numerical information. The type of knot, its position, the color of the string, and how the strings were plied could all convey different meanings. For example, a single knot might represent 10, a double knot 100, and so on. So, a chasca might carry a quipu representing the number of llamas in a certain province or the tribute collected. Imagine having to learn to read messages by feeling intricate knots. It's a bit like ancient binary code, but touch-based. This allowed communication of complex data without spoken language, and it was certainly a far cry from your average letter. Historians still argue whether the quipu system primarily served administrative and economic purposes, recording census data, tributes, or supplies, or if it also conveyed historical narratives, legal decrees, or even personal messages. While its use for detailed numerical data is well established, its capacity for complex narrative transmission remains a subject of ongoing debate and research. So, as you succumb to slumber, picture the tireless chasquis, their footsteps echoing softly on ancient Inca trails, carrying the silent, knotted wisdom of an empire across the roof of the world. As we gently descend from the heights of the Andes, our slow historical journey brings us to a period of fragmented power and burgeoning new ideas. Medieval Europe. Close your eyes and imagine a landscape dotted with castles and monasteries, thick forests, and muddy, unpaved roads. Unlike the centralized empires we've explored, the concept of a unified, state-sponsored postal service in medieval Europe was, for the most part, non-existent. Communication here was a much more patchwork affair, built on necessity and local initiative. During this era, if you wanted to send a message, say, from your humble village to a distant market town, you couldn't just pop it in a mailbox. Oh no, that would be far too convenient. Instead, you'd likely rely on travelers, merchants, pilgrims, or perhaps the occasional passing soldier. It was a rather informal, hit-or-miss system, with a safe delivery of your message depended entirely on the good graces and honesty of a stranger. Imagine trusting your most important messages to someone whose name you didn't even know, simply because they happen to be heading in the right direction. It makes you appreciate modern tracking numbers, doesn't it? A mainstream historical fact is that the primary organized communication networks in medieval Europe were established by monastic orders and universities. Monasteries, with their vast landholdings and extensive networks of affiliated houses, often had their own couriers who would carry messages, books, and documents between them. Similarly, universities, with scholars traveling across Europe, developed systems to transmit academic correspondence and student records. These were highly specialized, closed networks, serving the needs of the learned and the pious, not the general public. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Some medieval towns and cities, particularly those involved in long-distance trade, began to employ dedicated town messengers or city couriers. These individuals were often recognizable by their distinct uniforms or badges, and they would deliver messages within the city or to nearby trading partners. Imagine them as the original Uber Eats drivers, but for parchment instead of pizza. They were often paid per delivery, and their reputation for speed and honesty was crucial to their livelihood. A slow or dishonest courier wouldn't stay in business for long. Historians still argue whether the lack of a centralized postal system in medieval Europe was a significant hindrance to broader economic and social development, or if the informal, localized networks were sufficient for the needs of the time. While it certainly limited the flow of information compared to Roman times, the system did eventually evolve. So, as your thoughts gently drift, picture the solitary medieval rider, splashing through a muddy lane, carrying a precious letter, a small, vital link in the fragmented tapestry of medieval communication, slowly bringing you closer to a peaceful sleep. From the decentralized communications of medieval Europe, our gentle historical exploration now takes a rather intriguing detour into the secretive world of one of the most powerful and enigmatic organizations of the Middle Ages, the Knights Templar. Close your eyes and imagine the hushed cloisters of a remote commandery, the rustle of robes, and the faint scent of incense. You're now peeking into a communication network that wasn't about public messages, but about maintaining control and secrecy across a vast international order. The Knights Templar, a military and monastic order founded in the early 12th century to protect pilgrims in the Holy Land, grew incredibly wealthy and influential. They had commanderies, farms, and castles stretching from Jerusalem to Scotland, accumulating vast treasuries and engaging in complex financial dealings. Managing such a dispersed and secretive organization required an equally sophisticated, albeit clandestine, communication system. They couldn't rely on the fragmented public routes. Their messages were too important, too sensitive. A mainstream historical fact is that the Templars developed their own private and highly efficient courier service. Their knights and trusted sergeants regularly traveled between their various houses, carrying dispatches, financial records, and orders from the Grand Master. These couriers were often highly skilled and dedicated, familiar with safe routes and trusted waypoints, making them far more reliable than a casual merchant. Imagine the cloaked figure, riding swiftly through the night, a sealed message tucked securely inside his tunic, knowing its contents could impact the fate of their order or even a kingdom. Now for a quirky tidbit. To further enhance the secrecy of their communications, the Templars are believed to have used various forms of simple ciphers and coded messages, along with wax seals bearing unique impressions to verify authenticity. Imagine receiving a letter where every third word was the actual message, or where a specific symbol on the wax seal confirmed it was genuinely from the Grand Master. It's a bit like ancient encryption, ensuring that if a message fell into the wrong hands, its contents wouldn't be immediately decipherable. They were, in essence, the intelligence agency of their time, complete with their own secure messaging service. Historians still argue whether the Templars' communication network was solely for internal organizational matters managing their finances, troop movements, and religious affairs, or if they also, perhaps informally, facilitated communications for monarchs or popes, leveraging their widespread network and trusted couriers. Given their influence, it seems highly plausible they occasionally acted as a discreet, high-speed mail service for powerful allies. So, as you slowly drift into slumber, picture the silent, dedicated Templar courier, riding under the watchful stars, safeguarding the secrets and communications of one of history's most mysterious orders, ensuring your peaceful journey into dreams. Shifting our sleepy gaze from the cloistered secrecy of the Templars, we now turn toward another vast and influential empire that masterfully integrated communication into its very fabric, the Ottoman Empire. Close your eyes and imagine the rich tapestries of Istanbul, the bustling bazaars filled with exotic scents, and the call to prayer echoing softly over the city. You're now entering a world where postal routes were not just about delivering letters, but about binding together a diverse dominion that spanned 3 continents. The Ottoman Empire, at its peak, was enormous, stretching from North Africa to the Balkans and deep into the Middle East. Governing such a sprawling entity required an intricate and reliable communication system. Their solution was the Menzelhane system, a network of postal stations, not entirely unlike the Roman or Chinese models, but adapted to the unique geography and political structure of their empire. These stations, often fortified and staffed, provided fresh horses, accommodation, and security for couriers, ensuring messages could travel across vast distances. A mainstream historical fact is that the Menzelhane system was crucial for maintaining central control over the empire's distant provinces. Messages, known as firmans, imperial decrees, intelligence reports, and administrative documents flowed regularly between the capital, Istanbul, and the regional governors. This constant flow of information allowed the Sultan to react swiftly to rebellions, manage trade, and oversee tax collection. Imagine being a courier, carrying the Sultan's seal, knowing that the document you held could change the fate of a city or a general. Now for a quirky tidbit. To ensure the efficiency and security of the system, many Menzelhanes were managed by local landholders or chiefs who were granted certain privileges in exchange for their service. This decentralized management meant that the quality of service could vary widely. You might arrive at one station to find fresh, eager horses and a warm meal, and at another, you might be lucky to get a rusty stirrup and a shrug. It was a rather human system, prone to the quirks of local hospitality or lack thereof. It's a bit like navigating different regional accents of efficiency, isn't it? Historians still argue whether the Menzelhane system, despite its imperial purpose, also facilitated a significant amount of private correspondence or commercial communication for merchants and common folk. While its primary function was undoubtedly state-driven, the infrastructure itself, with its horses and stations, would have been a tempting resource for private individuals. It's plausible that, for a fee or a favor, some private messages could have hitched a ride on the Imperial Express, though certainly not officially. So, as you drift into a peaceful slumber, picture the rhythmic thud of hooves on ancient Ottoman roads, carrying silent messages across a vast empire, ensuring your journey into dreams is as smooth and uninterrupted as possible. As the echoes of Ottoman hooves fade into the historical distance, our slow-paced exploration now shifts to a fascinating development that began to emerge alongside state-sponsored postal services, the rise of private posts. Close your eyes and imagine the bustling streets of a medieval or early modern European city, the clang of a blacksmith, the distant cries of street vendors, and the distinct possibility of someone, anyone, willing to carry a message for a fee. This era marks a crucial turning point as the need for communication extended beyond the imperial elite to merchants, bankers, and even ordinary citizens. For centuries, sending a private letter was a logistical nightmare. You relied on favors, chance encounters, or perhaps a particularly obliging traveling merchant. But as trade expanded, as cities grew, and as the pace of life quickened slightly by ancient standards, the demand for more reliable personal communication soared. This is where enterprising individuals and families saw an opportunity. They began to offer their services as private couriers, often specializing in particular routes or serving specific guilds or wealthy patrons. A mainstream historical fact is that the earliest forms of private postal services often sprang up in conjunction with trade routes and commercial centers. Merchant guilds, for instance, frequently employed their own couriers to transmit contracts, invoices, and other vital business documents between cities. These were often more reliable and faster than relying on the haphazard public roads. Imagine a group of wool merchants in Flanders needing to send urgent news to their buyers in Italy. They weren't going to wait for a state messenger who might not even be going their way. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Some of these early private couriers developed intricate systems of code words or even specialized clothing to identify themselves and ensure trust. It was a bit like a secret society of delivery people, ensuring that their paying customers felt secure. You might spot a courier with a distinct feather in their cap or a particular color of sash, signaling their affiliation to a reliable, if unofficial, network. This was all about building a reputation in a world where a lost or tampered letter could mean financial ruin. Historians still argue whether the growth of private postal services was primarily a response to the inefficiencies and exclusivity of state-run systems, or if it was driven more by the burgeoning demands of a rapidly expanding commercial economy. It's likely a combination of both. As the world became more interconnected through trade, the need for reliable, accessible communication became paramount, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. So, as you drift deeper into slumber, picture those earnest private couriers, dashing through cobbled streets or across open fields, carrying the personal and financial messages that quietly, but powerfully, began to knit together the fabric of early modern society, ensuring your peaceful journey into dreams. From the varied landscape of early private couriers, our gentle historical narrative now focuses on perhaps the most famous and successful example of a private postal enterprise, the Thurn taxis family. Close your eyes and imagine the intricate network of routes stretching across fragmented Central Europe, a heraldic horn perhaps painted on a carriage, and the rhythmic jingle of harnesses. For centuries, this family literally owned the mail. The Thurn taxis dynasty, originating from Italy in the 15th century, built an unparalleled postal empire. They began by offering services to emperors and princes, often providing faster and more reliable communication than any state could manage. Their genius lay in establishing a vast network of relay stations, much like earlier imperial systems, but entirely under private control. These stations, known as Posthauser, offered fresh horses and experienced riders, ensuring a swift and consistent flow of letters and dispatches across vast distances. Imagine setting up a business that could span multiple kingdoms and principalities, maintaining consistent service even as political borders shifted and wars erupted. It was a remarkable feat of entrepreneurship and logistics. A mainstream historical fact is that the Thurn taxis family held a monopoly on postal services for the Holy Roman Empire and later, for many of the independent German states, for over 300 years. Their influence was so profound that their postal routes became the de facto communication backbone for much of Europe. They essentially operated a multinational corporation long before such a concept even existed, connecting cities and courts with a regularity that was unprecedented for its time. Now for a quirky tidbit. To ensure the security and authenticity of their mail, the Thurn taxis couriers often carried elaborate postal patents or identification documents, along with their distinctive postal horn. Imagine presenting a beautifully embossed document at each stop, proving your legitimacy. And that horn? It wasn't just for sounding a fanfare. It was a practical tool used to announce the arrival of the mail to postmasters and to warn travelers on the road to make way. It's a bit like a medieval siren, but with much more charm and far less urgency, unless you were waiting for an important letter. Historians still argue whether the long-standing Thurn taxis monopoly ultimately hindered or helped the development of public postal services. On one hand, their efficiency was undeniable, and they provided a crucial service. On the other, their powerful grip on the market certainly made it difficult for any state to establish its own independent postal system. It's a classic debate between private enterprise efficiency and public service accessibility. So, as you drift into a deep slumber, picture the iconic Thurn taxis' postal carriages, moving steadily through the European night, carrying the silent narratives of commerce and diplomacy, ensuring your dreams are as undisturbed as the mail flowing through their ancient routes. Leaving the well-established routes of the Thurn taxi's empire, our gentle historical progression now crosses the vast Atlantic, landing softly on the shores of colonial America. Close your eyes and imagine a rugged landscape, dense forests, nascent settlements, and the sheer challenge of communicating across vast, untamed distances. Here, the concept of a postal service was less about ancient empires and more about individual grit and pioneering spirit. In the early American colonies, mail delivery was, to put it mildly, an adventure. There was no established, continent-spanning system. Instead, communication relied heavily on word of mouth, chance encounters, and the determination of individuals willing to brave the wilderness. If you wanted to send a letter from Boston to Philadelphia, you might entrust it to a merchant making the journey, a traveling clergyman, or even a Native American messenger. Imagine the suspense. You just have to hope your precious letter, perhaps detailing a business deal or a family update, eventually reached its destination, weeks or even months later. A mainstream historical fact is that the first official attempt at an intercolonial postal service in North America didn't truly take shape until the late 17th and early 18th centuries, often initiated by individual colonial governments. For instance, in 1673, Governor Francis Lovelace of New York initiated a weekly post between New York and Boston, carried by a single post rider. This brave soul would trudge through snow, rain, and thick forests, navigating treacherous terrain with only a vague trail to guide them. Now for a quirky tidbit. These early post riders often carried not just letters, but also news, gossip, and even small packages for settlers along their routes. They were essentially walking or riding news agencies and delivery services, connecting isolated communities. Imagine eagerly awaiting the post rider, not just for your mail, but for the latest news from the outside world: who got married, what crops were yielding well, or if there was any new trouble with the indigenous tribes. They were truly vital links in the social fabric of the nascent colonies. It was a rather intimate form of communication, wasn't it? Much more personal than a barcode and a tracking number. Historians still argue whether the slow development of a unified postal service in the colonies was due to the immense geographical challenges, the lack of central authority, or simply a lower demand for widespread communication in a less densely populated and interconnected society. It was likely a complex interplay of all these factors. So, as you drift into a peaceful slumber, picture those solitary colonial post riders, their horses trudging through untamed landscapes, carrying the hopes and news of a new world, one letter at a time, bringing you closer to your sweet dreams. From the rugged trails of colonial America, our slow historical journey now accelerates, albeit briefly, into the realm of legend and raw daring, the Pony Express. Close your eyes and imagine the vast, untamed American West, endless plains, towering mesas, and the thundering hooves of a lone rider silhouetted against the setting sun. This wasn't a long-lived postal service, but its impact on American mythology and its sheer audacity remains unparalleled. The Pony Express emerged in 1860, a desperate gamble by a freight company, Russell, Majors, and Waddell, to secure a lucrative mail contract. They needed to prove that mail could be delivered faster across the American continent than via the slower stagecoach lines. Their solution? Young, lightweight riders riding at breakneck speeds, changing horses every 10 to 15 miles at specially built relay stations. Imagine being one of those riders, a mere teenager perhaps, carrying a satchel of critical dispatches, galloping across treacherous terrain with only a light saddle and a strong horse beneath you. The stakes were incredibly high. A mainstream historical fact is that the Pony Express dramatically cut down mail delivery times. A letter that might have taken weeks or even months to reach California from Missouri by conventional means could now arrive in about 10 days. This was a revolutionary speed for its time, connecting the booming West Coast with the established eastern states. especially vital during the lead-up to the Civil War. It literally bridged a continent with speed and courage. Now for a quirky tidbit. The riders of the Pony Express were often orphans, young men who were small in stature, but incredibly brave and skilled horsemen. They famously had to swear an oath, often cited as, "I, rider's name, do hereby swear before the great and living God, that during my engagement, and while I am an employee of Russell, Majors and Waddell, I will, under no circumstances, use profane language that imagine trying to keep that oath while being chased by outlaws or Native American tribes." It's a bit like a really intense job interview, but with a lot more dust and danger. Historians still argue whether the Pony Express was a financially viable venture or primarily a publicity stunt designed to showcase the company's capabilities for future, larger contracts. While it captured the public's imagination, it operated for only about 18 months before being made obsolete by the completion of the Transcontinental Telegraph line in October 1861. Its brief, daring existence, however, cemented its place in history as a symbol of American ingenuity and perseverance. So, as you drift into a deep slumber, picture those legendary Pony Express riders, a blur of motion across the vast plains, carrying the hopes and news of a nation, thundering you gently into dreams. Having witnessed the daring, brief dash of the Pony Express, our historical journey now gently glides across the Atlantic once more, landing in Victorian Britain, a place where the postal service underwent a quieter, yet utterly revolutionary transformation. Close your eyes and imagine the foggy streets of London, the gentle clip-clop of horse-drawn carriages, and the steady, insistent ticking of pocket watches. Here, the idea of sending a letter wasn't a grand adventure or a private luxury. It became an accessible, affordable right for everyone, thanks to a man named Rowland Hill. Before Hill, sending a letter in Britain was a chaotic and expensive affair. The cost often depended on the distance it traveled and the number of sheets of paper, and famously, the recipient, not the sender, paid the postage. Imagine the awkwardness. You'd get a letter and then have to decide if you wanted to pay for it, potentially refusing if it looked like an unwanted bill or junk mail. It was a system ripe for fraud and incredibly inefficient for a burgeoning industrial nation. A mainstream historical fact is that Rowland Hill, a schoolmaster and inventor, is credited with introducing the uniform penny post in 1840. His radical idea was deceptively simple: standardize the cost of postage regardless of distance, and have the sender pay for it up front using a prepaid stamp. This was the birth of the modern postage stamp, specifically the iconic penny black, the world's first adhesive postage stamp. Imagine, for the price of a single penny, you could send a letter from London to Edinburgh. This democratization of communication was nothing short of a social revolution. Now for a quirky tidbit. The penny black, while revolutionary, wasn't without its teething problems. It was printed in black, and the cancellation marks, often red, were sometimes hard to see, leading to stamps being reused. This led to the rapid introduction of the penny red, which showed cancellations more clearly. Imagine a government struggling with early 19th century inkjet technology, trying to make sure people weren't getting a free ride. It's a bit like today's debates about digital piracy, but with tiny pieces of paper. Historians still argue whether the penny post's primary impact was economic facilitating trade and commerce by speeding up transactions or social, enabling families to stay in touch, fostering literacy, and democratizing access to information. It was undeniably both, leading to an explosion in correspondence and dramatically changing how people communicated, laying the groundwork for the modern postal service we know today. So, as your eyelids grow heavy, picture the humble penny black, a tiny piece of paper that quietly, yet profoundly, transformed the world of communication, lulling you into a peaceful slumber. From the quiet revolution of the penny post, our slow, winding journey through postal history takes an unexpected turn, revealing how the humble mail system transcended its purely functional role to become a canvas for expression and, sometimes, even a tool for influence. Close your eyes and imagine the intricate designs on old postcards, the bold typefaces of propaganda leaflets, and the subtle messages sometimes hidden within. You're now stepping into the realm of mail art and propaganda, where the Postal Service became a silent, yet powerful, medium. As postal services became more accessible and ubiquitous, they opened up new avenues for communication beyond simple letters. The advent of postcards, for example, transformed quick messages into miniature works of art, souvenirs, and even political statements. People began to adorn their envelopes with elaborate drawings, create unique stamps, and engage in artist stamp movements, transforming everyday mail into something expressive and personal. Imagine receiving an envelope where the sender had intricately hand-drawn a tiny landscape or a whimsical creature. It made the arrival of the mail so much more delightful, didn't it? A mainstream historical fact is that during major conflicts, particularly World War I and II, postal services were extensively utilized for propaganda. Governments would issue patriotic stamps, create illustrated postcards promoting national unity or demonizing the enemy, and even distribute leaflets through the mail. This was a low-cost, high-reach way to influence public opinion and maintain morale on the home front. Think of the iconic loose lips, sink ships posters, often distributed through the postal system, subtly reminding citizens of wartime secrecy. Now for a quirky tidbit. During certain periods, especially in the Soviet Union and other communist states, postage stamps became miniature ideological billboards. They depicted heroic workers, triumphant agricultural scenes, or scientific achievements, all designed to reinforce state narratives. Collectors around the world unknowingly, or perhaps knowingly, amassed tiny pieces of political messaging. Imagine a stamp featuring a beaming collective farmer, silently urging you to work harder for the state, all while you're just trying to send a birthday card. It's a bit like modern social media, but with much more deliberation and less immediate gratification. Historians still argue whether the primary impact of mail-based propaganda was genuinely effective in shaping public opinion, or if it mostly reinforced existing beliefs among those who already supported the government. While it certainly contributed to a national mood, direct causation is hard to pinpoint. Nevertheless, the fact that governments invested so much in this medium speaks to its perceived power. So, as you drift into a peaceful slumber, picture those countless stamps, postcards, and envelopes, each a tiny artifact carrying not just a message, but a whisper of history, culture, or even political ambition, gently guiding you into your sweet dreams. From the artistic and propaganda-laden envelopes of yesteryear, our long, gentle historical journey finally brings us to the modern postal service, the ubiquitous, often taken for granted system that quietly underpins much of our daily lives. Close your eyes and imagine the vast sorting centers, the rumbling trucks, the precise movements of automated machines, and the quiet thunk of a letter falling into your mailbox. We've come a long way from a lone runner braving the desert, haven't we? Today, the Postal Service in most countries is a massive, complex logistical operation, often one of the largest employers in a nation. It's a testament to the enduring human need for reliable communication. While digital messaging and email have certainly transformed how we connect, the physical mail still plays a vital role, from delivering packages and parcels that fuel e-commerce to sending official documents, bills, and, yes, even the occasional handwritten letter. Imagine trying to explain to an ancient Egyptian courier that one day, tiny pieces of plastic would be used to buy goods, and that someone would then physically deliver them to your doorstep within days, anywhere in the world. They'd probably think you were describing magic. A mainstream historical fact is that the Universal Postal Union, UPU, established in 1874, standardized international postal exchanges, creating a single postal territory for the reciprocal exchange of mail. This agreement means that a letter mailed in, say, Vietnam, can reliably reach its destination in, say, Peru, thanks to common rules and agreements between member countries. It's an incredible feat of international cooperation, allowing mail to flow seamlessly across borders, something that would have been utterly unimaginable for most of history. Now for a quirky tidbit. Despite all the automation, postal services around the world still employ some fascinating specialized methods. In some remote areas, mail might still be delivered by boat, by plane to isolated communities, or even by mule. There are places in the Grand Canyon where mail is still carried by pack animals. Imagine getting a letter that's literally been on a donkey's back for part of its journey. It's a bit like a delightful throwback to our earlier historical explorations, reminding us that sometimes the old ways are still the best ways for specific challenges. Historians still argue whether the advent of digital communication will eventually render physical mail obsolete, or if the Postal Service will continue to adapt and evolve, focusing more on package delivery and specialized services. While the volume of traditional letters has certainly declined, the surge in online shopping means package delivery is booming. It's a fascinating, ongoing transformation, a testament to the enduring legacy of those first ancient messengers. As our journey through the history of postal services draws to a close, let your mind drift from the disciplined runners of ancient Egypt to the daring Pony Express riders, from the grand Roman roads to the quiet hum of modern sorting machines. Feel the soft blanket settling around you, the gentle hum of your fan, and the stillness of the night. The story of how we send messages, how we connect across distances, is a story of human ingenuity, perseverance, and the timeless desire to reach out to one another. Each delivered letter, each successful package, carries with it the echoes of countless footsteps and the quiet dedication of individuals spanning millennia. Let these historical whispers lull you into a deep, peaceful sleep. Your own messages for tomorrow can wait. For now, just rest.